In this episode of BCG's CEO Moments of Truth, we explore how does a CEO disrupt their own company? And how do you reinvent a legacy business for the AI era? It was November 2022 when Kate Johnson became CEO at Lumen Technologies. Almost the exact moment that generative AI burst into the mainstream. The technology landscape was shifting fast, yet Lumen couldn't have felt more removed from that future. Kate had inherited a legacy telecom company weighed down by debt, aging infrastructure, slowing innovation, and the threat of delisting was closing in. What she saw, however, was possibility, a chance to disrupt the business from within, to emerge as the essential infrastructure for data centers and the AI economy. The challenge would be serving entirely new customers with new technology and a new mindset. Kate, you had a wonderful and incredibly successful career in the technology world, including 4 years at Microsoft overseeing a $45 billion business. What attracted you specifically to Lumen?
The Lumen opportunity was really, really unique because it's a fiber optic network, right? And I just happened to study that in school. I was an electrical engineer and I did my senior thesis on fiber optic technology. Based on my experience at Microsoft, I knew that telecom was really the final frontier for digital transformation. And that had been something that I've been working on for a decade. I could, go into the company with that mindset, and I thought maybe make a difference.
So you started Lumen in November 2022. What did you find the situation like?
The circumstances were pretty dire. We had $20 billion of debt. We had a rapidly declining revenue base. We had what I would call product portfolio sprawl, where we had been making lots of little bets instead of really concentrating and figuring out how to innovate. There was very little innovation at all. We carried an enormous amount of technology debt as well because we didn't have the capital, the cash to invest in modernization.
Sounds like a combination of financial debt, technology debt, culture debt at the same time, and no time to lose. Just a few weeks later, GenAI hits the world. How did you feel about that in your new job?
I probably didn't understand the full impact at that moment. Our premise and of the transformation, the board had asked me, please pivot this company to growth. And we were going to think about that from a core asset perspective. The fiber network is where the value is, and huge amounts of data being transferred from and to is going to be how we model this turnaround. The advent of AI just accelerated that hypothesis. So that was fortuitous and a moment that now looking back was incredibly important to our story.
So at that moment, you basically saw an exploding volume of data, which ultimately is a huge opportunity. So that's the way you digested the news, so to say.
Yeah, but remember, I was carrying the weight of understanding where we were as a company at the exact same time. So just going after the opportunity, we didn't have that luxury. When we talk about, debt restructuring, on the other side of that debt, were the hyperscalers saying, we need connectivity for this AI problem we're trying to solve. So we were able to kind of do the dance across that entire restructuring moment because we knew we could get the cash if we focused on delivering exactly what the hyperscalers needed in service of the rest of the portfolio. And so it was, wow, this is an opportunity that if we can clean up some of this, mess that we have, we can go after it with gusto, but you couldn't do one without the other.
As a CEO, you obviously declare a vision, you articulate a strategy, but you came in at a moment when the company was really in a very difficult situation. How did you create the excitement and the energy for what was going to come?
And we picked some of the top performing VPs, about 10 of them, and we asked them to go construct a mission and a vision and a value proposition for what we could be. And we asked them to actually think about the assets, but to ignore all of the negative, pressures that they felt. And if you had the freedom to do anything, what would it be? And they came up with a vision and a mission to basically say that Lumen could pivot to growth if we focused on the one thing that we could do best, which was to connect people, data, and applications quickly, securely, and effortlessly. Now, of course, we've been connecting people, data, and applications for a long time, many decades. It's the quick, secure, and effortless that was new. And that really spoke to cloudification and the digital transformation that I knew was at the heart of whatever we were going to do to fix the company.
Freedom can be liberating, but it can also, in the first moment, be something very unusual. How did you convey that sense of freedom to them?
So what is it, the Janis Joplin song, freedom's, defined by when you have nothing left to lose. We were there. The circumstances were existential, and we faced potential Chapter 11, potentially breaking up the company. Essentially, the market, whether it's the industry analysts, the customers, or Wall Street, had left us for dead. And when you're left for dead, the bad news is, you don't get a lot of attention when you're innovating. The good news is it gives you space and it gives you time. And we took that space and time and got very intentional about what if. Let's dream. What if we created network as a service at scale on our network? What would that look like? Let's do it as a little bit of an experiment, a little bit of a hobby. And then we got a couple of customers, and okay, let's do it more than a hobby. Let's actually create it in a production, ready kind of way for mission critical apps. And we built up this momentum that it was only the freedom of that moment that could have created the space and energy for a company that was that downtrodden to aspire to do something so bold.
How did you move from vision into day-to-day execution in the organization?
Well, we looked across everything we needed to do. And by the way, it was not a short list, right? There was a lot of work to do. We had to reboot the culture and bring in talent from both networking and telecom. We had to transform our capital structure. And then we had to think about how are we going to get to growth? That's a lot to do all at the same time. But we really did sort of organize the lanes to go after those big categories to make some impact short term.
You mentioned culture, and that's a topic on the mind of every CEO. And also the question, well, how do you want to evolve that and how do you practically do that? You were very vocal in your early months and quarters at Lumen that you want to change culture. How did the organization receive that?
With disbelief. I think when you're new from the outside and you say, I really care about the people, we're going to put them at the center of everything we do. I'd very publicly say, we're going to rebuild this company starting with the people. And the reason why I was focused on that is because I knew that the culture of telecom was not going to give birth to a transformation and a company that could grow. It was definitely a play not to lose orientation. It's one of survival. Let's make that revenue that's declining last as long as possible. That's very different than let's take all of our cash and instead of paying a dividend, let's innovate. Let's figure out how to help customers, with what's on the horizon in the future, AI, two totally different orientations around mindset. So we had to teach our people how to play to win. And there was a lot associated with it, but at the very essence is risk. How do you take risk? How do you get the courage to make a bet? And how do you get back up and be resilient after maybe that risk that you've taken didn't work out so well? Those were the things that we needed to help our people learn how to do. And we were very intentional about rolling out skills training to do so.
So then things evolved and you get into a very positive dynamic with customers, with your organization, with investors. Was there any moment where you personally felt, oh, wow, this is working. This is great. This is not just a dream. This is it.
So look, it's really early for a victory lap. Without a doubt. We've made incredible progress. We've transformed our capital structure. We've built that organic growth engine. We've just made our most recent acquisition. We successfully divested our fiber, to the home business. And we have a culture where people recognize that we can talk about the hard things and do the hard things. And all of that's amazing. But the truth is we still have so much more to go to deliver the revenue growth that we've promised the market. And I try and stay focused on that. Now, I have a bench of advisors. I have the BCG team, on that bench with me. And I have advisors inside and outside the company where we do have our moments of celebration and hope, but I try not to get ahead of myself with that because I think it's important to celebrate the wins, but to also stay deeply focused on the outcome that we started out to try and achieve.
We are living in a time where AI is changing everything. I believe every business is going to be impacted, and there will be many companies that will find themselves in a similar situation as Lumen was in when you took over. Long history, successful for a long time, but then also sitting on assets that are no longer that valuable, an operating model that maybe isn't fit for the future. I think it's going to be the norm for many businesses out there. What is your advice to other CEOs who get into a situation like you did?
Two things that we've done at the company. Number one, investing in people and believing that they're at the heart of any transformation. I think too often I see CEOs say, okay, here's our aspirational culture. They don't spend any time investing in it. And they just say, we're going to go take that hill now, let's go. And this is how we interact together. You have to actually be very intentional on the training and the skills in order to help them practice and build and learn and grow. The second thing is we anchored everything into this notion of we didn't actually know the answer. I didn't show up to the company saying, I've got a hypothesis and I know I'm right, let's go. And nobody else on the leadership team did either. We instead built a team that anchored itself in this notion of our job is to get it right. And that means we have to admit when we're wrong. We have to take educated guesses. We have to pick ourselves up when we fail, and that has to be something that we do for and with each other, forgiving each other when we're wrong, forgiving ourselves when we're wrong, and really orienting around this continuous improvement and this continuous learning. It has been instrumental in helping us navigate a digital transformation in the middle of the most significant technology change that the world has ever experienced.
Kate, it's absolutely wonderful to hear from you about Lumen and the turnaround of the company. Congratulations on the progress, and thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you, and thank you for the partnership.
Thank you.